All right, folks, we are back once again with our discussion of Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. I'll remind you that if you want to read this book, it is available for free. That's how it was published. And you can go get it. It's very long. And we're going to talk about specifics, and maybe you want to read along. I don't know. Also, patreon.com/Leighton Night. You get a video version. You get ad-free versions. You get a mini episode every week if you sign up at the $5 a month or more tier. Anyway, I love these bad book clubs. I love doing them with Leighton. We have a good time with this one, so enjoy the episode.
And we're back.
We're back and hyper rational, more rational than ever. I've never felt so rational.
This is Leighton Night with Brian Wagton. Today we're here to continue our Bad Book Club with part 2 of Harry Potter and the Methods of actually.
By the way, can I tell you what I think the least rational part of this is? Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Why is the abbreviation HPMOR not HPATMOR? Why are we putting O and of in this and not the other small words that you typically don't include?
Get his ass.
Either it's HPMR or it's HPATMOR. And I don't like it. Can we please just be fucking consistent? Mm-hmm. Now, what I don't know is in the community, what do they call the other books? Like, is the first one HPSS or HPPS, I guess, depending on whether you're reading it or not. Yeah. HPPS, that's my favorite internet transfer protocol.
I was trying to come up with a better title of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that would apply to Methods of Rationality, because there's philosopher in the...
Oh my God, should we... Well, the philosophers are rational. Should we rationalize all the Harry Potter books? Like Harry Potter and the Rationalist Stone? Harry Potter and the Rock of Reason?
That's a way better name. The Chamber of Secrets.
Let's see.
Chamber of False Hypotheses.
Should be, yeah, or like, yeah, and the Room of Insufferable Logic.
Harry Potter and the Half-Baked Argument.
Oh, I like that. That's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of...
And the Bloglet of Fire.
Yeah, done. Easy.
The Prisoner of Asking Too Many Questions.
Yeah, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Yudkowsky.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I don't want to title these 2 episodes with the full Methods of Rationality, because I don't actually want anybody who's looking up the Methods of Rationality to find this.
Nope.
But you did suggest one based off of a text that I sent was just nice Manifesto idiot.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, because we've been texting about this extensively just to make it a little bit more bearable. And I've had to, over the break...
Yeah, feel free to read any and all of my texts.
Yeah, all the time. So we might as well start from the beginning.
Yeah, because so if you listen to part 1, we went through some general kind of things, and now we're really going to dive into it.
Oh, wait, actually, before we do that, we have a special guest.
Did you just wait, actually, me?
I did, yeah, Harry Potter and the Wait, actually.
Yeah. Is now the time for this?
I think now is the time for this, because neither of us have any idea what our special guest is going to say about this work of fiction.
So I was texting with Adam Becker because, well, for one thing, I played him in our trivia league the other day, and he won.
Ooh.
Yep. So congratulations, Adam. And I also, when I texted him, I was like, also, I'm mad at you because of your fucking book I'm reading with Leighton, Methods of Rationality. And he was like, oh my God. So I mentioned to Leighton, I sent Leighton some of what we were talking about. And she said, get him to leave a voice note. So I have about a minute-long voice note from Adam that he said, in an airport, so the sound quality may not be useful. So we're going to hope for the best here. But he was kind enough to send us a sound file. So I'm going to play this right now. I basically just said, any thoughts you might have on this, doesn't matter how long it is, whatever, just hit me. So, okay, here's the wonderful Adam Becker's thoughts on this.
Okay, Brian, I just got off of a plane and just saw your message. You should not have let Leighton cyberbully you into getting you to read this piece of hot trash. Why are you doing this to yourselves? This is not a good idea. Don't do it. Also, like the most magical specialist boy in the world, who's the protagonist of this fucking thing, is just very obviously the author, right? Like I was saying last time we talked about this, like the things that happen in this story, the way that he just shames the adults around him into giving him magical time travel powers, the whole thing is complete nonsense. Like, I mean, obviously, like, you know, I don't mean nonsense like this stuff doesn't exist. Of course it doesn't exist. It's magic. I mean nonsense like it's not good writing. It's not good narrative. Anyway, good luck.
Adam Becker, everybody.
Wow. Adam Becker, please read his book, More Everything Forever, and I think is a good primer on both of our discussions about Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. You should listen to our episode with him to get a little bit wider context of the ideas at play here and general criticism of the rationalist movement and Silicon Valley billionaires and their desperate need to colonize Mars.
Yes. Now, we're really going to go into it here. So I actually didn't leave too many notes to myself. A lot of my notes I did leave to myself involve the word sucks or oh my God. Mostly I just highlighted stuff.
That's what I typically do.
Because I was like, what?
Over the break, I was like screenshotting relevant notes and I did not even get half of the way through.
Yes, you would send me things occasionally. So let's just get into it. I mean, from the start, the title of chapter 1, A Day of Very Low Probability. By the way, the chapter titles make me livid.
The number of audible groans that I did when I got to a particular, and I think further past where you were, it's like when it gets to, you know, chapter 65, the Stanford prison experiment.
Yes, I saw that. Things like chapter whatever, Bayes' theorem. And I'm like,
chapter 2, everything I believe is false.
It positions itself as kind of a textbook and then fails to explain concepts. But first of all, A Day of Very Low Probability, I was like, this is everything about that title screams blog to me in a bad way. Right. I really liked, so the first thing I highlighted here was when, what are Michael and Patunia, Harry's parents, when Patunia says to Michael, my love, I know I can't win arguments with you. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, has the author maybe heard this exact statement before expressed to him from a partner?
Yes, and the way that Harry responds to it is, Mom, Harry said, if you want to win this argument with Dad, look in chapter 2 of the first book of Fineman Lectures on Physics. There's a quote there about how philosophers say a great deal about what science absolutely requires. And it is all wrong because the only rule in science is that the final arbiter is observation, that you just have to look at the world and report what you see. Off the top of my head, I can't think of where to find something about how it's an ideal of science to settle things by experiment instead of arguments. But yeah, that's right before.
Well, why do people have such a Feynman boner? They need to calm down with this Feynman
dude
stuff.
This guy's Feynman.
Loves Feynman, and it's not that there's not a lot to like about Feynman, but pulling out the fucking Feynman lectures, I don't know. It's just such a basic bitch move. I really don't like it. There's better sources for this stuff out there. Those lectures are classics, but I don't know, they're dated, and it's not, there's a lot of stuff in there that I don't know. It wasn't so great. So
You know what?
it's like the Gretel Escherbach thing where it's like, calm down with these references. We get it. You like smart stuff. Chill.
Speaking of references, and this is a very common fan fiction thing, so it's not like it's out of context to do this, but I think there's a certain, not even dated, I mean, it was dated by the time the 2010s were going on, but the number of obnoxious pop culture references in this are really grating because it's a particular genre
Terrible.
of pop culture reference.
Yep.
Like, and clearly he edited this out of one of the chapters, but then added it as like a little postscript. But there's a Ghostbusters parody.
Oh, that is the nadir of a book that is nonstop nadirs.
Yeah, but my first highlight actually came earlier than the thing that you mentioned, in that, within the canon of the actual books, Harry goes to live with his shitty family. Petunia, always hated her witch sister. So she's talking about like why there was this rift, and this is a really long thing, but for this to happen in the first couple of pages of the book did not inspire confidence. So sort of explaining why Petunia doesn't talk about her sister. Petunia bit her lip. I can't just tell you. You'll think I'm... She swallowed. Listen, Michael, I wasn't always like this. She gestured at herself as though to indicate her lithe form.
This, yes.
Okay, Dame Brown. Lily did this because I begged her. For years I begged her. Lily had always been prettier than me, and I'd been mean to her because of that. And then she got magic. Can you imagine how I felt? And I begged her to use some of that magic on me so that I could be pretty too. Even if I couldn't have her magic, at least I could be pretty. Tears were gathering in Petunia's eyes. And Lily would tell me no and make up the most ridiculous excuses, like the world would end if she were nice to her sister or a centaur told her not to. The most ridiculous things, and I hated her for it. And when I had just graduated from university, I was going out with this boy, Vernon Dursley. He was fat, and he was the only boy who would talk to me. And he said he wanted children and that his first son would be named Dudley. And I thought to myself, what kind of parent names their child Dudley Dursley? It was like I saw my whole future life stretching out in front of me, and I couldn't stand it. And I wrote to my sister and told her that if she didn't help me, I'd rather just... Petunia stopped. Anyway, Petunia said, her voice small. She gave in. She told me it was dangerous, and I said I didn't care anymore, and I drank this potion, and I was sick for weeks. But when I got better, my skin cleared up, and I finally filled out, and I was beautiful. People were nice to me. Her voice broke. And after that, I couldn't hate my sister anymore, especially when I learned what her magic brought her in the end. There's lots here. There's a little poking at the canon with the Dudley Dursley thing, which, again, very typical of fan fiction. And not that it's unwarranted, but I think something that comes throughout this is like a sheer contempt for the source text.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe I differ from a lot of people where I frequently see people like, there's nothing worse than a piece of media that's like mean or has contempt for its audience. And actually, I disagree. I think sometimes that's
what this
fucking
whole
great.
podcast is.
Yeah, absolutely. But it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, even for something that's as easily dunk-onable as the original Harry Potter books.
We talked about this on text too, but it is weird because the guy obviously has a big Rowling boner because his little jokes at the beginning of every single chapter are some weird pop culture reference, but he's substituting Rowling in for something else in such a way that the first time he does it, you're like, all right.
Yeah.
And then also always has to put EY in front of it, so you know it's him.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'd be totally confused. But after like the third or fourth time, you're like, oh my fucking God, why are we doing this? It's not cute. It's not funny. It's just, it's sucking his own dick.
And I think to Steel Man, that's, at least of that era, was a pretty typical thing to preface fan fictions with, like, this belongs to the author. Okay, and I can see that he was trying to have some fun with it. However, the pool of pop culture references that this work draws from are very annoying and very clumsily done. Like later, the point that you didn't get to, the culmination of the Escape from Azkaban arc, which is generally the high point of this for me, like genuinely good. If you wanted to read a little bit of this to get a taste of what this is like when it's better and not total shit, read whatever that arc is. But it culminates with Harry transfiguring the materials to create a rocket to attach to his broom to fight the anti-gravity field of the center of Azkaban, and then quotes... He does a whole "this is my boomstick" thing from Army of Darkness, but with "this is my broomstick." Mm-hmm. It's just like, oh, man, you're really pleased with this, aren't you? Yep. Like, I don't have a rational reason that I think this is annoying. I just think this is fucking annoying.
It's annoying. It is, I think it is objectively.
Anyway, annoying. I love
the pop culture stuff sucks. It feels completely out of left field and never works.
Which dovetails with the fact that he isn't funny, and yet so much of this is meant to be comedic.
I had to, a few points, like pause and be like, oh, that's supposed to be a joke. Like, yes. He thinks this is funny. That's why this is being said. It is like, which, you know, certainly in what I remember from the original books, like there are like cute little like pseudo jokey things in there. It's meant to be like light and funny, but succeeds far more than this guy does.
Yeah, like so much of the magic in the original books is that like magic is stupid. Like none of this makes sense. That's all silly. There's levity. You got Fred and George in there, and you have Ron, who's like a consistent source of comedy. And I will say that when Fred and George show up in this, he writes them pretty well and pretty faithfully, which is easy to do because they're very distinct. Anyway, I love that Petunia is introduced. Her husband is like hyperlogical, and then she's like, I threatened to kill myself if my sister wouldn't make me pretty and not fat.
Yeah. I read a thing. I've been thinking about this since I read it. It was served to me on Instagram. I can't remember the source, but it was someone's tweet or whatever. And she said, apologies to male authors everywhere, because actually I did just breast boobily down the stairs. And then there was a follow-up post from her that said, them thangs were thangin'. Which I thought was
were thangin' is one of my favorite sentences.
Very funny, yes. But I did just breast boobily down the stairs has stayed with me for
That's true. I'm always
here.
Breasting boobily both down and up the stairs.
I can only imagine.
The ankly up and down the stairs. We kind of end up speed running what is sort of Harry's introduction into the magical world in the original books, and with McGonagal instead of Hagrid kind of being the mentor figure here, taking him into Diagon Alley and explaining a lot of wizarding things to him. Now, I think there's something to be said for the fact that in the original books, Harry is Muggle-born and completely unaware of any of these wizarding things, so he does act as a viewpoint character for the reader to kind of stand in. That's part of the magic and the whimsy of the whole thing, is that it's learning this stuff for the first time, enjoying not being horrifically abused your whole life. Like, there's something very nice.
See stuff and see a character who's honestly reacting like, oh my God, what? No way.
Yeah.
This Harry Potter sees stuff and he's like, prove it.
Yes, no, literally. So the first example of that, and I think this excerpt is so emblematic of the entire thing. But McGonagal turns into a cat and not turns into a cat. So Harry says, you turned into a cat, a small cat. You violated the conservation of energy. That's not just an arbitrary rule. It's implied by the form of the quantum Hamiltonian. Rejecting it destroys unitarity, and then you get FTL signaling. And cats are complicated. A human mind can't just visualize a whole cat's anatomy and all the cat biochemistry. And what about the neurology? How can you go on thinking using a cat-sized brain? Professor McGonagal's lips were twitching harder now. Magic. Magic isn't enough to do that. You'd have to be a god. And so, again, I understand the impulse. A lot of the things in the original books don't make sense. You're attempting to explain them or poke holes in them using science. That's kind of the bit of this whole thing. However, this is like barely into the second chapter, and I already hate this twerp and want to punt him into the sun.
And also, like, okay, I think the science there is fine. What he's saying isn't wrong. Nobody talks like that. I actually have a very rough guideline, which is I don't like people who say FTL. I never, ever heard a scientist in my field say FTL. Right. It's like, no, you're not saying that. There are other words and concepts that have similar, like just say, you can say non-unitary, fine. That implies it, well, whatever. That I read that and I'm like, this is written like a person who does not speak this language.
Yeah. Which, autodidact. And in going through this, so much of it is Harry is framed to be an obnoxious little twerp.
That's right. So it's hard. I would totally agree. It's hard to separate, like, is he supposed to be annoying and talk like a weird child when he says this? Maybe so.
And yet, even though it's positing that this is the framing of it, all of the adults in the story clap and laugh and are shocked and humbled by this child. And I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but it's in this like diagonal. We have so many
notes. We can skip around. Like,
yeah, it's so this is actually, these two bits are thesis statements for the whole thing, really. All those people believing him and cheering him, Harry couldn't stand to let that be false, to flash and fade like so many other child prodigies, to be a disappointment, to fail to live up to his reputation as a symbol of delight, never mind how he'd won it. He would absolutely, positively, no matter how long it took, and even if it killed him, fulfill their expectations, and then go on to exceed those expectations, so that people wondered, looking back, that they had once asked so little of him. I thought the same thing when I was that age, so there's that. But in continuing what I thought when I was that age, this is Harry talking to McGonagal again. Children aren't meant to be too much smarter than their parents, Harry said. Or too much saner, maybe. My father could probably outsmart me if he was, actually trying instead of using his adult intelligence mainly to come up with new reasons not to change his mind. Harry stopped. I'm too smart, Professor. I've got nothing to say to normal children. Adults don't respect me enough to really talk to me. And frankly, even if they did, they wouldn't sound as smart as Richard Feynman. So I might as well go read something. Richard Feynman wrote instead. I'm isolated, Professor McGonagal. I've been isolated my whole life. Maybe that has some of the same effects as being locked in a cellar. And I'm too intelligent to look up to my parents the way that children are designed to do. My parents love me, but they don't feel obligated to respond to reason. And sometimes I feel like they're the children who won't listen and have absolute authority over my whole existence. I try not to be too bitter about it, but I also try to be honest with myself. So yes, I'm bitter. And I also have an anger management problem, but I'm working on it. That's all. It feels so emblematic of this entire thing, even though at a certain point the narrative is showing Harry that he doesn't have to totally be like this, and that part of it is that he's partially like a shred of Voldemort's soul. And yet, can you, listener, imagine spending 600,000 words with this kid?
These blocks of massive paragraphs of like just trudging through.
I have never,
in a way that even like smart kids don't talk like this. I hated it. I hated these massive, you know what? I forget where this is. I highlighted it somewhere. I think in chapter 2, people who talk about updating, like, did you update your priors or whatever? Oh my God, go fuck yourself with that. Like, again, the basic idea is fine and correct, but anyone who's like, oh, I guess I'm going to have to update my priors on this now. Oh, makes me upset.
There's further like a weird, I'll read it and then we'll talk about it. And again, it's so hard to do the sort of snippets that we typically do with one of these episodes, because to get a full idea, it's like 2 pages long. It's monologue after monologue after monologue, and people doing monologues at each other, which would make it not a monologue, but they're so fucking long. And I read 3 Harry Potter books in a day. I read all the time. I read very fast. Even this is like, oh my fucking God, dude, get an editor. Yeah. Which clearly he doesn't do. I don't think he gets editors on his blog posts. It's like he's just kind of left to monologue unchallenged.
That's blogging, right? You don't.
Yeah, that's how blogging works.
You have to pay someone to edit.
Yeah,
blogging, you're just doing it.
You're not really accountable to anybody else. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, so McGonagal is concerned about why Harry is the way that he is, because he's clearly very angry.
Yeah, he fucking hates everybody.
Yeah. Harry's voice was shaking. That owl does not represent me. My parents never locked me in a cupboard and left me to starve. I do not have abandonment fears, and I don't like the trend of your thoughts, Professor McGonagal. The witch looked down at him gravely. And what thoughts would those be, Mr. Potter? You think Harry was having trouble saying it. I was abused? Were you? No, Harry shouted. No, I never was. Do you think I'm stupid? I know about the concept of child abuse. I know about inappropriate touching and all of that. And if anything like that happened, I would call the police and report it to the head teacher and look up social services in the phone book
Right,
and tell
and something
Grandpa.
that we're about to see play out for real in a couple chapters here.
Yeah, and tell Grandpa and Grandma and Mrs. Fig, but my parents never did anything like that. Never, ever, ever. How dare you suggest such a thing? The older witch gazed at him steadily. It is my duty as deputy headmistress to investigate possible signs of abuse in the children under my care. Harry's anger was spiraling out of control into pure black fury. Don't you ever dare breathe a word of these insinuations to anyone else. No one. Do you hear me, McGonagal? An accusation like that can... Hold on, I got a notification.
The fact that he talks like that. Oh, my God.
An accusation like that can ruin people and destroy families, even when the parents are completely innocent. I've read about it in the newspapers. Harry's voice was climbing to a high-pitched scream. The system doesn't know how to stop. It doesn't believe the parents or the children when they say nothing happened. Don't you dare threaten my family with that. I won't let you destroy my home.
What the fuck is happening? He's talking to a teacher like this.
Yeah.
A well-respected... Yeah.
And then she says, like, maybe you don't remember being abused, but there's a charm called obliviation that erases your memories.
The existence of this charm causes endless dithering in this book. Like, how do you know you haven't been obliviated is a question that hangs over essentially every single statement that everybody makes.
Yeah.
Because it's this obsession with, like, how do you know what you know?
So there's so much of this rationalist stuff, but so much of it seems to imply that, like, if you're hyper intelligent, you can be really manipulative.
That's right.
And I think it's interesting to have manipulative characters. That's a fun thing. I like to do that. It's fun to write. It's fun to read.
Huh? That's interesting.
However,
I think maybe we should explore that in the future sometimes because actually, you know what? Never mind. Actually, never.
But how do you know that I'm not just saying that it's fun? Because that's what somebody who would think that manipulation is bad would say.
Oh my God.
Maybe you're reacting like that. But honestly,
I'm fucked now.
There are hundreds of pages in this that's just two characters saying, but how do I know that you're not manipulating me right now? Because if I was manipulating you, then I would have done this and this and this.
Yes.
That's like the entirety of Draco and Harry's relationship. And I think that there's some shred of like, well, hold on, we can segue into my favorite line.
Have that when you also have a picture of the character's interior workings, right?
Yes.
So it's hard to write these things where there's a lot of people talking about what do they actually know, which is then immediately followed by descriptions of what they're thinking and what they know.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because, so much of this relies on, I don't think, having read the Harry Potter books, I think it's extremely inaccessible and you don't really know what's going on because it's incredibly unclear storytelling. But if you have no knowledge of the Harry Potter books, none of this shit makes sense. And
Which
so there's
is
this
pretty much where I'm at. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this kind of dramatic irony of a reader of the original books will know that Professor Quirrell is actually Voldemort. And for all of the manipulations on top of manipulations on top of manipulations, even at where I am in chapter 75, there's been no pointers towards that. I mean, obviously there's pointers in that if you're reading closely, you see the things that he say where it's like, yeah, it was the thing that Voldemort would say. But it's just like this massive blind spot that for all of this talk of rationality and logicking and everything where Harry is making these 5D chess moves and doesn't figure out that it's Voldemort, like it really strains credulity that's right. Essentially he logics it out and that's how he finds out near the end. But he also, why are we doing this 500,000 words in?
Early in the book figures out that Voldemort is alive. He didn't die.
Yeah.
And knows that. Also,
through deductive reasoning.
The book goes out of its way to talk about how Quirrell is being weird. He like zombies out for a minute and then pops into life, which is something that, as far as I can tell, nobody else in the book is doing. Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that this is in front of him, by the way, he goes to his secret tea room to have expensive Chinese tea with this guy. God knows how many times. They spend a lot of time together. This guy, Harry, is this guy's star pupil, and they are hanging out. Sometimes Harry is even hanging out in Quirrell's sexy little bedroom that he keeps by in his classroom where he can lay on the bed and eat snacks for a while he needs to recuperate or whatever. But the fact that he spends so much time with this guy who is also one of the few interesting characters in this book, and doesn't figure it out. Like, I mean, I don't know. I was somewhat expecting.
That's the most
I'm not
11-year-old.
Yeah.
The most 11-year-old part of it. I think it is actually a very accurate depiction of grooming, which I think that's an interesting angle.
But I was expecting, and if I don't know how the book ends. I don't want to, I should say, I don't plan on reading anymore. At some point, Harry was going to say, "Yep, I do that. I figured it out way back when, and here's how I figured it out, and here's when I knew it." I thought maybe this is part of Harry's 7D chess that he seems to be constantly playing.
Yeah, and I think this is referred to later once it's revealed that he's Voldemort, that Voldemort felt that, like, in Harry, he had an equal who was interesting, and that, like, he stopped battling Dumbledore because he stopped being interesting. And so really, ultimately, there is nobody else in the story who is operating on the 5D chess level that Harry is, except for Quirrell.
Yeah.
And so it's refreshing where instead of these lectures that are condescending and everyone's like, oh, what? You have two people who are smart talking to each other, and there's like an even dialogue, and Quirrell is often like, actually, you're wrong, and here's why. You're a fucking idiot. Which is nice because we spend all of our time with this twerp Harry, and seeing him get put in his place by someone smarter is interesting. That's half of why the Azkaban arc is him and Quirrell buddy copping to break into Azkaban, to break out Bellatrix together, and then it goes really wrong, and they have to science and magic their way out of Azkaban. Okay, that's great. They talk to each other. Harry's really split about whether they're doing the right thing. He gets into Azkaban and sees how horrible the Dementors are, how awful the conditions are,
which
how
he knew
all of
also
the people...
because he faced and then killed (1).
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. It's maybe one of the dumbest things that happens.
Oh, I have thoughts about that.
That is also the most revealing about Yudkowsky's worldview.
It's really, really nuts.
One random quote. World domination is such an ugly phrase. I prefer to call it world optimization.
I have it right in front of me, Layden. Right in front of me. Yep. And if talk about, and that's not even a character saying that, right? Or maybe someone says it later. Sorry, someone says it. I think,
because he'll do these little
chapter.
parenthetical samples, which is another common
a little
fanfiction
epigraph
thing.
in the That's right. What's the title of the chapter that this happens in? It's a really good one.
The efficient market hypothesis.
The efficient market hypothesis. Ooh, I can't wait to read that. Oh, except I'm not in an economics class. By the way, can we also talk about Harry's fucking 11-year-old investment strategies? Where he was like, wait, what is he? There's one point where he talks about, and of course I'd put 60% in an index fund and 40% in Berkshire Hathaway, just like any rational person would. It's like, what?
It feels like another example of him trying to be funny. And it's just not funny.
May well be. You just can't tell.
Because I think some of the humor is supposed to come from Harry is so over the top with this stuff. And we'll get to this. Another thing, my favorite line in this entire fan fiction, which to be clear is not, I'm not going to read it yet, but the narrative is actively condemning it. And a huge part of this book, the huge part of this book is Harry trying to convert Draco from the dark side to the light side. And this is supposed to be a very early indicator of what a terrible person Draco is. We'll get to it. But still, it comes out of fucking nowhere. And is insane.
I wish you hadn't told me about it, actually, because I was ready for it. Okay, we'll get there.
It hit me like a fucking truck, and I couldn't stop laughing, and I feel terrible about how funny that line. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, other stuff.
Well, I mean, we're not too far off from that. What else? I highlighted the word putative because, come on.
And you really haven't heard of other wizard asking these sorts of questions or doing this sort of scientific experimenting? Harry asked again. It just seemed so obvious to him.
See, now this is where I'm like, okay, I'm kind of on board for this, because the idea of let's do scientific experiments on magic, I think is cool. And there's a basic thing there. Some of those sequences are interesting. Like, I actually did like the section, or at least the basic idea of the section where they're like, okay, we're claiming that magic isn't what it used to be. You can't spell anything anymore, right? And the question is, why? Is that even true? Is it because of this fucking pureblood thing, or is magic itself getting weaker? I thought that was an interesting, let's test that hypothesis.
Well, he's trying to awaken Draco as a scientist.
Right. But so it's turgidly written, but the basic idea of let's do an experiment to see if magic is actually getting weaker or not. I think there's an interesting idea there, even if the writing is subpar.
And as always, I like any sort of contentious relationship between two characters. And I like that he and Draco have this sort of rivalry going. Yes. And that in doing that, he's trying to disprove, trying to kind of sever the connection between Draco and his father by proving
an interesting idea.
That the pureblood stuff is pretty bullshit, which is sort of what he anticipates. And then once it's disproven and it challenges Draco's entire worldview, then Draco flips the fuck out and starts torturing Harry.
Yes. Although, again, because this book sucks, it kind of happens on a dime, and then Draco becomes somewhat of a totally different character. I don't know. I the characterizations are terrible in this book, generally speaking. People just people just don't have any substance.
Yes. They're either smart or they're stupid and not worth spending time on.
Yeah, Ron Weasley.
There's in the chapter Reciprocation, there's a little preamble. A few reviewers have asked whether the science in this story is real or made up. Yes, it is real. And if you look at my profile, you'll see a link to a certain nonfiction site that will teach you pretty much everything Harry, James, Potter, Evans, Ferrez knows, and then some. I really wish he would stay in his lane about positing his way of how to think about things. Because that's where the rationalist stuff really thrives of what do you believe and why do you believe it? How do you know that you believe it? That's good. Love that. But don't spread that out to the classic Silicon Valley thing of, well, I've mastered the hardest thing of all, which is computer science, which means I am an expert, which means I'm an expert at every other thing because it's inherently less than computer science and thus easier.
I was once talking to, did I tell this story on the Adam Becker episode? I don't think so.
Maybe.
Talking to a guy in tech at a thing, and I said, it had been a while since I'd seen him. I was like, oh, what's the latest? What are you doing? And he goes, oh, well, curing cancer, going to the moon, and living forever. With no trace of I'm kind of joking about this. He was dead serious. And this was pretty early on. This is a while ago. And I was like, what? Is this what these people think like? And I think the answer is yes, some of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole Miri thing of making friendly AI is the most important problem facing us right now. And nobody's paying attention to us because I am a seer of doom and you should listen to me. And it's taken such a physical toll on me to be the one who's the only person on the planet. In a lot of his nonfiction writing and also his tweets, he is constantly referring to himself as the most important person in the world. I did just want to say, though, in addition to making AI friendly, the other thing that Miri is trying to make is a porno. Oh, that was so close to a spit take. So Harry gets to King's Cross and he's going to get on the Hogwarts Express. Sorry, just real quick before this, in the chapter, let's see, in also the chapter, the Planning Fallacy, which is right before Reciprocation, there's a section I highlighted, which I fucking hated, where Harry says, quote, "What happened to me personally is only anecdotal evidence. It doesn't carry the same weight as a replicated, peer-reviewed journal article about a controlled study with random assignment, many subjects, large effect sizes, and strong statistical significance." And I think this is a great example of, this is a 100% valid thing to think when you're trying to investigate something. Writing it like this and having a character actually say it is completely unhinged. And reading it on the page, it's like from our Psychostick app way back. I agree with you, but also shut up. Please, just no, I don't want to know about, I don't want to read this in this way. This is not the point. This is bad writing.
for this environment.
In my life, I've been accused of using big words to sound smarter. The thing is, bigger words often let you convey ideas more specifically or more concisely. However, this is using big words to sound smart and stringing as many of them together to sound even smarter. And if you're trying to communicate to people, that's not how you do it. You don't use a ton of jargon. You need to be clear, concise, direct. And from a storytelling perspective, Jesus Christ, brevity is the soul of wit. Kill your darlings. Anything. Now,
so jargon is a really good point here, because Harry's talking to someone who doesn't know what he's talking about, and he uses someone who doesn't know what science is, apparently, which I have a whole other thing about. Like, the wizards have never seen a light bulb at some point. Someone met, like, they've never seen a light bulb. Is that okay?
It's kind of a thing in the original books that wizards are kind of shocked by basic things like electricity.
Oh, okay. So that's in universe. That's just me then. But he's trying to explain something to someone, and he uses the phrase peer-reviewed journal article. They don't know what that is. Controlled study. Okay, maybe. Random assignment. Maybe. Large effect sizes. What the fuck is that? Strong statistical significance. Nope. It's just he's bludgeoning people with these words. It sucks.
And I think there is a certain type of smart person who does do that. And that is the type of character that Harry is. But god
doesn't
damn,
make it fun
man.
to read.
No, or enlightening, or even if you know what he's talking about, that it's almost worse because you realize how superfluous. There's a word.
Yes.
All of that is. So he's waiting at King's Cross for the Hogwarts Express. Here's another poking fun at canon, but that also is unintentionally revealing about the views of this book. His mother helped me figure out how to get to this platform from King's Cross station, so it was kind of hard to tell him to get lost. And it's not that I hate this Ron guy, Harry said. I just ... Harry searched for words. Don't see any reason for him to exist, offered Draco. Pretty much. Which, look, as a huge Harry Potter fan back in the day, I was always a Ron hater. I was never like a true shipper in any sense of the word in Harry Potter, but it was like, why aren't Hermione and Harry together? Like, what the fuck? Why Ron? Which, you know, as a child, now I've become an adult and understand that women go for mediocre men all the time. Yeah. Oh my God. So Harry is talking to Draco and realizing, kind of unlike in the canon, he likes this kid. He's like, you know, articulate, well-groomed. He's nice. There's this stupid plot device that's invented for this called comedy.
Oh my God.
That becomes very load-bearing for a while in a way that's just obnoxious. But the idea is that it's a can of soda that's magical, that when you drink it, something funny is guaranteed to happen that will make you do a spit take. And so
it's
obviously,
a lot like being at a Ninja Sex Party show.
There you go. It's Harry buys a ton of them for science. Also, the introduction of the Mokeskin pouch, which is, I think, another good example of expanding on the existing lore, which is the idea that the little purse that Hermione ends up getting in Deathly Hallows that has like infinite storage, Harry gets one of those now and then practices like what will allow things to be called up from it. And like he can go downstairs and be in it, pile up his books. All right. Yep. That's fun. That's an interesting exploration, because in reading the books, it's like, why isn't everybody using this? Which is a lot of the driving force of this whole piece of work. Anyway, so he buys an obscene number of these and then tests it out. And so he drinks it and looks at the Quibbler, which is Luna Lovegood's father's publication that's sort of like the National Enquirer of the Wizarding World. And the headline is something like Draco Malfoy impregnated by Harry Potter, which is another like nod to other Harry Potter fan fictions. It's like mpreg. That's an established fan fiction trope.
Also my favorite file format.
So Draco is obviously very upset by this.
I also like JPEGs.
So Draco is very upset by this headline.
And MP3s.
Mm-hmm. Draco snarled.
It stands for men pregnant 3 times.
Stop. We've gotten to my favorite line in this entire fan fiction.
Okay. Now, but before you read this line, trigger warning.
This is objectionable. However, it's also really funny.
It is pretty nuts.
Send me to hell, cancel me, whatever. You got to admit. Draco snarled. She has some sort of perverse obsession about the Malfoys, too, and her father is politically opposed to us, so he prints every word. I have to get through it. I have to get through this. As soon as I'm old enough.
I'm just going to kick back here and watch you do this.
I can do it. As soon as I'm old enough, I'm going to rape her. I'm sorry.
You texted me immediately when you read that.
Because that's an insane sentence. That's one of the sentences of all time.
It certainly is.
And from the perspective of the narrative, after establishing, Draco and Harry are getting along, this is supposed to be like, Draco is horrible, as is stated up front.
That's right. It is presented to make him bad.
Yeah, and then he goes on to explain the elaborate process of how he would get away with it.
It is, that's right. It is presented in such a way, not immediately there, but fairly shortly thereafter, as if he had been like, since I'm old enough, I'm going to do a genocide. Like,
yeah.
That it's supposed to make him terrible, but that doesn't change the fact that it is insane.
That he says, as soon as I'm old enough, I'm going to rape this 10-year-old girl.
Yeah, it's
it's also
awful.
It's also the qualifier of as soon as I'm old enough.
Yeah, totally. Because first of all, what is that?
It's the primary load bearer of the joke.
Yeah.
When I grow up, I want to be a rapist.
Yeah. I'm
sorry, everybody. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light. Most of us are victims of some form of sexual assault. I get it. You gotta laugh. Sometimes you gotta laugh.
It's because it's so nuts.
It's so absurd.
There are ways of showing Draco to be a bad guy that are not, I mean, this is not just hitting you over the head with a hammer.
Sweating profusely.
This is aiming a bad person gun at somebody's head and being like, this guy sucks. It's like
aiming a bad person gun at an 11-year-old's head. Reminder, Draco is 11.
11.
So for all the precociousness as we've established from Harry at this point, this is meant to be the extremely obvious counterpoint that Draco is extremely evil. Yep. And he references over and over that, like...
By the way, when you texted me this, it was not clear to me because you didn't give me any context. I was just like,
I didn't.
I was like, there's a chance this is endorsing it. It's definitely not. Oh, my God.
As I said to Brian, this is this book's equivalent of Ready Player One's Are You Two Cocks Arguing About Star Wars Again?
One of the best lines we've ever read. For sure.
Agree. But honestly, this one's funnier to me probably because it's so fucked up.
Do you like that these chapters are so long that so many of them have to have quote unquote aftermath sections about what happens in the chapter?
Yeah, I like that. Especially when especially when you get to the battle ones and then the aftermath is the same interminable from a different point of view, but nothing's really different. I want to show to the eagle-eyed video viewer, we're 48 minutes in of my highlights. I'm there. That's where I am.
These.
I'm a centimeter in.
I do want to say in this chapter reciprocation, the phrase, if the taint is not checked, occurs, which I highlighted.
Look, I'm checking that taint all the time.
Mm-hmm. Shortly after that, is the statement, phrase, sentence. Persuasive, Harry said, meaning it descriptively rather than normatively. It's this kind of thing where I'm like, please shut up. I really don't want to read this. This was my overarching attitude for this whole book is I don't want to be here. I want to go home, and I'm already home, and I hate that.
Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality makes you feel like your home is no longer your home.
Yeah.
You won't be at home. Harry Potter and you're not at home here. So Harry Potter, James Evans Barris, goes on to the Hogwarts Express, and previously he had been told that he needed to find a girl named Hermione Granger. She didn't hear the answer from inside the compartment, but after the boy opened the door, she did think she heard him say, unless she'd somehow misheard, "Does anyone here know the 6 Quarks, or where I can find a first-year girl named Hermione Granger?"
The 6 Quarks.
Did you object to what are outlined as the 6 Quarks? There was an author's note that talks about, like, when I was 11, this is what the 6 ones are.
He's right about that. It's up, down, charm, strange, top, bottom. But for a time, I forget who it was, Gelmon maybe, called 2 of them Truth and Beauty, and that just didn't stick. Yeah. But now the standard thing is top and bottom, T and B. Yeah. That's totally legit.
Yeah. I figured that was the case.
Yeah.
And then he asks her PC or NPC. That is the question. Which, again, it's like this very common, socially isolated, kind of socially underdeveloped nerd thing that obviously continues into adulthood for a lot of people, where you don't see other people having personhood, especially other people who aren't smart.
You mean it's a version of the fundamental attribution error, Layden?
I'm so tired.
Yeah. Well,
I've honestly,
and you're going to keep reading this book. So if you think you're tired now, I can't wait to get your text for the next, what, day or something?
Yeah, probably accurately. It has been an exhausting week for a variety of reasons, but this has been the overarching, making it so much worse. I barely slept Tuesday night.
Why do we do
I had
this
like
to ourselves?
3 hours of sleep that I had fallen asleep reading this, and so my head was doing that non-dream, like, liminal state thing where it was just looping on Harry Potter and the methods of rationality. So I think the thing you said about mental illness last episode, very true. Oh God. Okay. I'm scrolling.
We just have to scroll. We're almost an hour in and we're on chapter 7.
Okay. I guess maybe the next thing that we should jump to. Oh wait, to the 2. Okay. So he puts on this sorting hat.
1 and more. Yeah. Anyway.
He puts on the sorting hat, and like, the sorting hat has a crisis of self-awareness once it's on Harry's head.
Because he's so smart.
He's too smart, yeah. And he has a long discourse where Harry is asking him a bunch of questions about, like, the nature of if he's sentient or not. And it ultimately comes down to the sorting hat announcing, Slytherin, just kidding, Ravenclaw. So a big departure.
And then the sorting hat, it has a tight 5 that it's been constructing because it's had so much time to sit around. So it says, just kidding, Ravenclaw. By the way, what's up with the food in Gryffindor? And then it goes into its whole thing.
Yeah. And there's like, so a big divergence from the canon is that Harry and Hermione are both in Ravenclaw. And Gryffindor kind of ends up getting a bit demonized throughout this. Mm-hmm. But I will say, to counterpoint it out, like, Hufflepuff gets a lot more clout in this version. That it's not just like the losers. Everybody else.
That is true.
It's like they're the ones doing all of the hard work, I think is the direct quote. There's this whole, I'm not going to read.
Yes, that's right. I like that.
I'm not going to read the whole Ghostbusters thing.
Oh my God. Do stay away from that.
I ain't afraid of Dark Lords.
It is just awful. I mean, really trying so hard to be funny and just failing on every level. And yeah, as you said, invoking pop culture that nobody wants.
Yeah. Okay, so we should probably briefly cover the quote unquote puzzle chapter, which there's the preface to it is, edit, don't panic. I solemnly swear that there is a logical, foreshadowed, canon-compliant explanation for everything which happens in this chapter. It's a puzzle. You're supposed to try to solve it. And if not, just read the next chapter.
Right. And so, okay, so some weird shit goes down in this chapter. And what was nuts to me is, first of all, when someone says puzzle, I think of a specific thing. But nothing, I think, notably weirder than anything else in the book happens in this chapter. It is not, or in the other books. It's like, okay, you're in a fucking magical land. Weird shit is happening. I did not need the warning at the top of this chapter that there's something to figure out. One trusts that the author, if weird shit is happening, it's going to be explained. The fact that this was presented as like someone would be reading this and be like, excuse me, is that was there anything notable about this that would have caused that? It seemed completely standard with everything else going on to me.
Yeah. The answer is, as with any good thing, time travel.
That was the puzzle.
Actually.
Yep. So Harry gets like weird notes and stuff happens where like he...
Bullies get hit with pies.
Yeah, or they come out of nowhere. And the answer is he time traveled and did it himself. And also because he's so smart, he remembered everything he needed to do and when he needed to do it, I guess. I was like...
Yeah. So when the Time Turner is introduced in book 3 of the original Harry Potter, it's kind of as a reveal after a lot of foreshadowing that, like, I thought Hermione was just with us, and that it's kind of used in the climax to bring it all together. So there really isn't much dickering in terms of like, here are all the different ways that we're going to use time travel. It's just like, oh, retroactively, this explains why Hermione was able to take so many classes, and that it's confiscated by McGonagal at the end. And then for the rest of the series, Rowling does not mention time turners again. They get rightfully memory holed because it causes too many problems to introduce time travel.
Once you start... Yeah, which is something you'd think a rationalist would be aware of, the rampant causality and just like stakes problems that time travel offers. And to his credit, at some point, as we've said, he realizes this is going to be a problem and McGonagall takes it.
Yeah.
Or doesn't take it so much as restrict its use to a very set period of time.
She puts a chastity belt on the time turner.
Yeah.
I will say one line from this chapter that I did like, because it's Harry saving Neville from being bullied, but in a way that's like really aggressive and shitty, is, I think you're going to be really cool someday, Neville said, but right now you're not. I thought that was a good line.
Mm-hmm. Neville gets some good stuff in
completely
here.
Sincere.
I gotta say,
every once in a while he spits a bar, and in the Azkaban arc, there's a good bit of it. Yeah. And as I want to talk about this thing with the Patronuses that we'll get to, but there is like a long section where I think he makes a really
Patronus stuff.
He makes a really well constructed, like humane, good prose, and then comes to the worst conclusion possible. And it's like, no, that was not that. How did you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm trying to fucking move through it. Random quote: "I'm not a psychopath. I'm just very creative." Which is like, why does so much shit from this feel like it would be on a crunch to hell JPEG shared on Facebook?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. All right. What chapter number was that?
I don't know. In my scrolling, I'm at 18 dominance hierarchies. Potions class. Okay.
Oh yeah.
This is my favorite part.
Potions class. Now let's see. Really, which chapter is this?
18.
18.
Oh, fucking shit.
Okay. Oh, sorry. You were on 18. I thought there was a line about 18 dominance hierarchies. I liked, you know what I really liked actually right away in this chapter?
What?
Harry says, "You don't have unions or tenure here, right?" And I was like, oh, hell yeah. Getting that viewpoint down.
I swear, Harry said without turning around, this place is almost 8.5% as bad as what Dad says about Oxford.
8.5, yeah. Again, it's supposed to be funny. Okay, so what happens in Potions class is Snape is Snape, and very briefly, he does not go near, and I'll tell you, this section is lifted directly from the books, like his opening speech, the questions that he asks Harry, shitting on Hermione, and that's where this diverges. And Harry, okay, so Snape does Snape stuff. He starts asking questions about whatever, clearly trying to somewhat school this upstart. Mm-hmm. And Harry essentially gives him a "don't you know who you're talking to" speech and loses his fucking mind on
Harry
this guy.
Goes full Karen.
Full Karen, absolutely. Starts invoking all sorts of basically he's like, I'm going to talk to HR
Literally.
now.
Here, I'll scoot through some of this. "You know," Harry said icily, "in one of my quite fascinating Muggle books, they describe a study in which people manage to make themselves look very smart by asking questions about random facts that only they knew. Apparently, the onlookers only noticed that the askers knew and the answerers didn't, and failed to adjust for the unfairness of the underlying game.
They didn't update their priors.
So, Professor, can you tell me how many electrons are in the outermost orbital of a carbon atom?" which I actually think he answers correctly.
I believe he does, yes.
Professor, and this is, I'm
again, sort of
over some
unclear on how much science these wizards know. Like, it seems to vary person to person. And some of them
whatever
have
is
never even
convenient
heard
for
of
the
it.
plot.
That's right.
Professor Severus Snape, Harry bit out, I know of nothing which I have done to earn your enmity. If there's some problem you have with me which I do not know about, I suggest we... Shut up, Potter. 10 more points from Ravenclaw. The rest
Hell
of
yeah.
you open your books to page 3. There was only a very faint burning sensation in the back of Harry's throat, and no moisture at all in his eyes. If crying was not an effective strategy for destroying this potions, Professor, then there would be no point in crying. Continued. So...
Because we only do what's rational.
So, said a voice colder than 0 Kelvin.
Terrible.
Eye roll. How does one go about filing a formal complaint against an abusive professor? Does one talk to the deputy headmistress, write a letter to the board of governors? Would you care to explain how it works? The class was utterly frozen. Detention for 1 month, Potter, Severus said, smiling even more broadly. I decline to recognize your authority as a teacher, and I will not serve any detention you give. People stopped breathing. Severus' smile vanished. Then you will be... His voice stopped short. Expelled, were you about to say? Harry, on the other hand, was now smiling thinly. Now...
Thinly. He loves the word thinly.
I searched this. It's smiling thinly is 18 times and thin smile is 11 times. Look, I get it. It's 600,000 words. That's a lot of words. You're going to repeat stuff. You clearly have your pet terms of phrase. However, if you consider making your shit shorter so it's not as egregious when you say smiling thinly to describe someone. Edit. The fact that you don't edit makes me frown fatly. But then you seem to doubt your ability to carry out the threat or fear the consequences if you did. I, on the other hand, neither doubt nor fear the prospect of finding a school with less abusive professors. Or perhaps I should hire private tutors as my accustomed practice and be taught at my full learning speed. I have enough money in my vault, something about bounties on a Dark Lord I defeated, but there are teachers at Hogwarts who I rather like, so I think it will be easier if I find some way to get rid of you instead. Get rid of me, Severus said, now also smiling thinly. What an amusing conceit. How do you suppose you will do that, Potter? I understand there have been a number of complaints about you from students and their parents. A guess, but a safe one. Which leaves only the question of why you're not already gone. Is Hogwarts too financially strapped to afford a real potions professor? I could chip in, if so. I'm sure they could find a better class of teacher if they offered double your current salary. 2 poles of ice radiated freezing winter across the classroom. You will find, Severus said softly, that the Board of Governors is not the slightest bit sympathetic to your offer. Lucius, Harry said, that's why you're still here. Perhaps I should chat with Lucius about that.
Just real quick, it's Luscious.
Luscious, yeah, of course. I believe he desires to meet with me. I wonder if I have anything he wants. Hermione frantically shook her head, and Harry noticed out of the corner of his eye, but his attention was all on Severus. You are a very foolish boy, Severus said. He wasn't smiling at all now.
Not a good little girl.
Are we even going to get to that?
I don't think we are, but it's important to point out that the phrase good girl or good little girl happens more than you might want it to, which is to say adult.
Yeah. You have nothing that Lucius values more than my friendship, and if you did, I have other allies. His voice grew hard, and I find it increasingly unlikely that you were not sorted into Slytherin. How was it that you managed to stay out of my house? Ah, yes, because the Sorting Hat claimed it was joking for the first time in recorded history. What were you really chatting about under the Sorting Hat, Potter? Blah, blah, blah. Severus tries to read his mind. Harry is like, oh, the Sorting Hat warned me about you. Harry ignored it and looked around the classroom. I have no intention of letting one unprofessional teacher ruin my time at Hogwarts, Harry said with deadly calm.
This sucks.
I think I'll take my leave of this class and either hire a tutor to teach me potions while I'm here, or if the board is really that locked up, learn over the summer. If any of you decide that you don't care to be bullied by this man, my sessions will be open to you. Sit down, Potter. Harry strode across the room and grasped the doorknob. It didn't turn. Harry slowly turned around and caught a glimpse of Severus smiling nastily before he remembered to look away. Open this door. No, said Severus. You are making me... You are making me feel threatened, said a voice so icy it didn't sound like Harry's at all. And that is a mistake. And so he gets out of this. Harry starts doing this thing where he snaps and then time turns. So he has like crazy magic shit happen after he snaps. He also gets the invisibility cloak like right away in this.
Right away.
So invisibility cloak plus time turner. He gets out of it and then
he
he like
everything.
He immediately, after being like, I feel threatened right now, like Harry pulling out his phone to record the interaction before he calls Snape a racial slur.
Yeah, this whole interaction sucks and it's like, can you imagine? It strains, and even for fan fiction, what the fuck is going on right now?
Well, Harry was so emphatic about, like, I'm not being abused. False accusations of abuse are really fucked up. And now he's just doing it. So he goes straight to the headmaster's office where Snape already is. And he starts, like, he makes an argument against Snape and tries to blackmail Dumbledore into firing him.
That's right, immediately.
And McGonagal agrees so much, but can't say it. It's what she's been wanting to say for so long.
She actually, he writes, McGonagal thought to herself, go off, bro.
Yeah.
No, no one has ever agreed with Harry more than McGonagal does in this sequence, but she can't say anything. And in fact, ends up punishing him.
Yeah. Harry's voice was razor sharp. I regret to inform you that you are not the center of the universe. Fucking rich dude.
Yeah.
I'm not threatening to walk out on magical Britain. I'm threatening to walk out on you. I am not a meek little Frodo. Earlier, it's established that Dumbledore is a huge fan of Lord of the Rings.
Gandalf thing. Yeah, it's fucking dumb.
This is my quest, and if you want in, you will play by my rules. Dumbledore's face was still cold. I'm beginning to doubt your suitability as the hero, Mr. Potter. Harry's return gaze.
That's something that pissed me off too. There's a lot of talk about what would the story do. That's not how a hero in the story would behave. And it's this kind of like meta element that really fucks this whole thing from a vibe perspective. I really hated that, like, we're telling a story, this fucking Joseph Campbell type shit that he keeps going to that well for, especially when there's Dumbledore.
Yeah, well, you would have really hated the entire book-long arc of Hermione advocating for heroines in a story. God, it's bad. Mm-hmm. That ultimately her group of heroines who are trying to forge their own stories and be the heroes of their own stories ultimately get saved by two men. Anyway, I am beginning to doubt your suitability as my Gandalf, Mr. Dumbledore.
Oh, ho, ho. This is a bad sequence.
It's really bad, and it's so long.
And long. Making the same point a billion times. It's like, we get it. What would have been wrong with one paragraph of, and I'm going to file a complaint? Look, the idea, again, it's not necessarily that the story ideas are bad here. Some of them are bad, but I don't think this is innately, like, what if Harry complained about Snape?
Yeah.
What would happen? Okay, sure. I'll go along for that ride. Why not? But he just pounds it into your skull over and over and over to a point where you're like, I get it. I see what's going on here. And it doesn't add anything. It's not well written. It's not, every point is just the same shit over and over. It's fucking.
This is 600,000 words of shower argument.
Yeah, that's right.
And when Snape announces that he's going to be less abusive to the whole school, there was an explosion of conversation. Two words were clearly identifiable in the beginning. The first was an initial "what," beginning many different sentences such as "what just happened" and "what the hell."
What?
The second was "scourgify," as students cleaned up the dropped food and spit out drinks from themselves, the tablecloth, and each other. Some students were weeping openly. So was Professor Sprout.
I highlighted weeping openly.
Everyone claps, everyone cries, everyone cheers for it's constant. It's crazy.
Yes. And this is even before he's a general.
God. Sorry, I just headbanged my microphone because this shit fucking sucks. So the potions class debacle is a setup for his punishment in Professor Quirrell's class. Which this is kind of, where Quirrell reveals that he trained in a dojo.
Oh, so this is my favorite thing. And then there's a story about Voldemort going to a dojo, so the idea of, Voldemort at some point being like, you know what I heard is sick? Fucking kung fu. I should probably learn that shit. And then goes to a dojo. But yes, Quirrell, I was just looking at this. Where is this? It's so great.
So the moment the word dojo comes out of his mouth.
Yes.
And to be fair, this recharacterization of Defense Against the Dark Arts into battle magic, this is another like, well, hey, if you're going to teach kids Defense Against the Dark Arts, at least teach them some practical shit too, which is not actually what happens. Because what was your quote that you were going to read?
I learned how to lose in a dojo, which is in italics, in Asia, which, as any Muggle knows, is where all the good martial artists live. And then there's some story about this, which involves Voldemort and is bad.
Yeah, Voldemort kills everybody because he can't learn the way of the dojo.
Yeah, because they refuse to teach him.
Yeah, which, you know, there's a little bit of a double thing there because, like, Quirrell, I think actually, based on how it goes at the end, I get the feeling that it's probably the real Quirrell, a.k.a. David Monroe or whatever his name is, actually went there, and Voldemort has just kind of absorbed
you got to admit, Leighton, what if Voldemort knew karate and was really good at it, is actually a really great idea for a story.
And
right?
then what if he didn't use that? And then what if Voldemort had a gun?
Yeah. Yes. What if he went through the whole fucking Kill Bill thing and learned, like, became a total karate master, like learned the 5-finger death grip, all that shit, right? But
look, I already have a 5-finger death grip.
He went through the whole thing. And he became a karate master. And then, after years of training, was like, wait, can I just kill everyone with magic? Oh, right. And then never used it ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Because none of this comes back. Anyway, so the whole idea of setting this up and teaching how to lose is because Quirrell is trying to make an example of Harry because Harry needs to atone for what he just did to Professor Snape.
Yep.
Professor Quirrell turned to regard the Slytherins. So, with the full approval of your teacher and in such a fashion that Snape cannot be blamed for your actions, do any of you wish to show your dominance over the boy who lived? Shove him around? Push him to the ground? Hear him beg for your mercy? 5 hands went up. It's I know that I just read that in a slightly horny voice, but like, does that not set off a does that not set off a flag for you? A little bit?
Yeah.
Also considering that, again, there are certain things that I know about Yudkowsky that I won't pull into this, even though it's publicly available information.
It's so funny, though.
No matter how badly I want to. But at the very least, from things that aren't the specific thing that I just don't think should be in the public eye, he has made a good bit of tweets about how into BDSM he is. So it's a little, I don't love it. Okay, so the whole idea, Harry gets the shit kicked out of him by a bunch of Slytherins. And then afterwards, he nobly says to the class, "No one's to take any revenge on them," Harry said hoarsely. "That's a request to anyone who considers themselves my friend. I had my lesson to learn. They helped me learn it. They had their lesson to learn too. It's over. If you tell this story, make sure you tell that part too." And then there's like sort of this good lesson from this. Like, Harry managed to nod. "Not all losing is like this," said Professor Quirrell. "There are compromises and negotiated surrenders. There are other ways to placate bullies."
Yes.
There's
Like
a whole
this.
art. Yeah. There's a whole art form to manipulating others by letting them be dominant over you. But first, losing must be thinkable. Will you remember how you lost? Yes. Will you be able to lose? I think so. I think so too. Professor Quirrell bowed so low that his thin hair almost touched the floor. "Congratulations, Harry Potter. You win." This is how it...
Yes,
like,
I highlighted
all right,
this
you've
too.
lost me. "There was no single source, no first mover. The applause started all at once like a massive thunderclap."
It's fucking so dumb.
Harry's couldn't... Harry's... typo.
Uh-oh.
Harry's couldn't keep the shock from his face. He risked a glance at his classmates, and he saw their faces showing not pity, but awe. The applause was coming from Ravenclaw and Gryffindor and Hufflepuff and even Slytherin, probably
Even
because
Slytherin.
Draco Malfoy was applauding too. Some students were standing up from their chairs.
Yes, that.
And half of Gryffindor was standing on their desks. So Harry stood there, swaying, letting their respect wash over him, feeling stronger and maybe even a little healed.
Yep. And then
Idiots.
the hottest wizard in Ravenclaw, the hottest witch, went up to Harry and gave him a big smooch right on the cheek and said, "Thank you
The big
for
smackaroonie.
everything." Yeah. Do you also like how Quirrell has his own point system that has a mandated exchange rate with normal Hogwarts points? And also, if you get enough Quirrell points, you get whatever wish you want at Christmas. A wish for literally anything, the way he phrases it. And so now we're creating this other, as if the house point system wasn't dumb enough. We're going to have this separate point system.
Yeah, it's like reporting that I'm going to fix the house point system by getting rid of the snitch in Quidditch.
Yeah, that was also bananas. By the way, Harry, guess what? You're new to this system, which, by the way, is presented as an advantage because I can see things nobody else can. So why don't we just get rid of the snitch? The Quirrell points, I was like, what? The last thing... Okay, so with the Quirrell points, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But then it becomes the singular focus of the book and we're at an hour and 50 minutes.
In the Ender's Game arc.
We're going to have to get to this pretty soon. And we're
Dude,
definitely skipping over stuff.
We committed so much time and so much energy to reading this dog shit. I feel like we gotta give it justice without killing you editing wise. But I think it's worth it. If we were going to read this much.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, and then we're going to skip over all this stuff. Like, I don't know.
We should do the really good stuff. But should I talk about the battle now, or there's stuff in?
Hold on, can I talk about Quirrell's weird little bedroom?
Oh yes, please. Oh, I love this hot little bedroom next to his...
You're the one calling it a hot little bedroom.
Your words, not mine. Your words, not mine.
You earlier said it was a sexy little bedroom.
I was
you
quoting
said that over text. No, you weren't.
I absolutely was, and I want that on the record.
Why do you believe what you believe, and how do you believe it? Mm-hmm. Sorry, switch that how and why.
I have indisputable male logic on my side.
Idiot, Professor Quirrell said fondly. The class was already laughing. Your classmates can teach you afterwards, or I'll tutor you privately if that's what it takes. But right now, you're going through the third door from the left in the back of the stage, where you will find a bed. A bed?
Hell yeah. Yes, that's exactly my reaction when I read that. A bed?
An assortment of exceptionally tasty snacks and some extremely light reading from the Hogwarts library. You may not take anything else with you, particularly not your textbooks. Now go.
Scented and unscented lotions. Yeah, I was like, so, again, we just yelled at a professor for being unprofessional.
Abusive.
And now another professor has been like, dude, get to my bedroom right quick.
No, after having him beat up.
Yes, after having him beat up. That's right. Now go chill in the bedroom. I'll be in a minute. And by the way, I think you'll particularly enjoy the snacks that I've set aside.
Like, what the fuck?
For you. And maybe there's something about the phrase exceptionally tasty snacks. What the fuck is going on with this room? Why did Hogwarts let him have this room?
Now remember, he's literally Voldemort.
That's right.
And he is grooming Harry. And maybe there's something to be said. Harry rants at the beginning, I'm not being abused. If I knew I was being abused, I know about inappropriate touching, I'd tell an adult. And then accusing and false accusations of abuse are bad. I'm going to falsely accuse Snape of abuse.
We never see Quirrell do anything like abusive in that way towards Harry.
Yeah.
No, it's not even hinted at, except for the fact that he has a snack bedroom next to his classroom that he sends children to.
Well, yeah, and when I say grooming, I mean grooming in the sense that he is grooming him to be evil, and it's a very explicit step-by-step process that directly mirrors sexual grooming.
I taught high school for a year. I was told, don't send kids to your bedroom.
With the promise of exceptionally tasty snacks. That's like the thing that they tell you not to do if a man in a van says that he's got a magical bedroom and a bunch of exceptionally tasty snacks.
Don't go. Yeah.
It's definitely nothing is going to happen where if you're old enough.
So this van pulls up. A guy jumps out and he's like, hey, kid. Then 12 other people pour out of the back of the van and start pounding you to the fucking pavement. And then he's like, guess what you just learned? A valuable lesson. Please come to my bedroom. I'm going to say, and I don't want to speak for you, that's bad.
This is the official stance of Late Night with Brian West.
That's right. Don't beat up children and then offer them weird rewards. It is one of the more, again, the lesson, learn how to lose, is great.
Yes.
I like that.
But then he keeps going.
Yeah.
Here's a line I hated that I texted to you being like, this wasn't my exact phrasing, but the feeling that I had was like, I don't even care if this is correct or not. It's just obnoxious. Harry blinked. He just had the dichotomy between the representativeness heuristic and the Bayesian definition of evidence explained to him by a wizard. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Cool. Fucking cool. What chapter is this? What number is this? I'm so lost in this book.
Fucking no.
Here. Okay, I highlighted in chapter 22 the scientific method, language, Mr. Potter. Some of us are innocent young girls. There we are, going back to that thing.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe this gets a lot worse in the arc where Hermione starts her like feminist thing. Girls are like really obsessed with boys in this, where like when other female the classmates are mentioned, like all they care about is boys, which like look, teenage girls are like that.
It's the case sometimes.
However, like, did you get to the point where Harry agrees to be pushed off the roof?
Yes.
Did you get to that bit?
Yes.
Where it's like 200 female students were all trying to levitate him towards them and nearly killed him because they're all obsessed with him.
Yep, that's right. Yes. Which that was definitely a moment. That was like one of the last things I read too, where I was like, what? They're also like into Harry that they all did it at the same time. And that's what, yeah.
There's a long bit where one of the Slytherin girls is like, I'm going to be Harry Potter's bride. Like, and then there's all this like good little girl stuff. And then like in talking to Hermione when they're doing experimentation, there's like, Hermione is the one who's constantly trotting out like, I'm just a 12-year-old girl.
Yes.
We shouldn't have to worry about this stuff. I'm 12.
Yeah, I'm just a child.
Yeah. Like, and crying a lot. She cries a lot.
She cries a lot in this one. The way she's written in this sucks.
Here's a quote that I like. Why does that matter to you? Professor Quirrell said. What have they done for you? Harry laughed. Oh, now that was around as subtle as Atlas shrugged.
Yep, I had that one too.
Pardon me, Professor Quirrell said again. It's a book that my parents wouldn't let me read because they thought it would corrupt me. So of course I read it anyway, and I was offended they thought I would fall for any traps that obvious. Blah, 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 appeal to my sense of superiority, other people trying to keep me down, blah, 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 which that's what this book is about. I don't know how intentional that was of you. But also, this is Yudkowsky's Atlas Shrugged. It is.
Yes, at least I was actually somewhat pleased he didn't talk about Atlas Shrugged in just glowing terms, because there is a definite parallel there. So actually, I put that as a point in his column. Later in this same chapter, there's a parenthetical which says, actually, for all Harry knew, there were all sorts of incredibly destructive secrets which physicists kept to themselves. And I just wanted to verify on the record that that is the case. So
yeah, it's sort of... It's like his argument, like, for deleting all the Roca's Basilisk shit, because he's like, you shouldn't tell anybody. Exactly right. You shouldn't share it with anybody who lacks the intelligence and discipline to discover them for themselves.
That's his
which
whole
almost
thing.
Feels like his criticism of academia, of like, they keep secrets from the public.
And that's his whole thing with Draco, is we have to promise that we're only going to like tell people if they're ready to hear it. This sort of thing, which is a weird fungible benchmark or like requirement that what do you think? What do you fucking mean they're ready to hear? It just doesn't make any sense.
Then he learns about Professor Quirrell, that Quirrell is really into space, and
I like the space sequence actually.
I do
thought
too.
The space sequence was nice.
Like it.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of grooming Harry and the way that this applies to the Patronus stuff later, I think it's pretty cleverly done and does a thing that people commonly say about the Horcrux issue, which is obviously foreshadowed here. If you know that it's Voldemort, that he, one of his Horcruxes on the Voyager probe, which is like, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea if we're going to do the science version of Harry Potter. Sure. And I think the way that the wonderment about space is written in this is pretty good. It's not terrible. Cool. But again, he comes to an extremely weird conclusion about it that I guess if you listen to the Adam Becker episode, you can probably see where we're going here. Oh my God. Okay, chapter 21, rationalization.
Yep, here I am.
Oh, okay, so this is the weird one where Hermione is like, we're not in a rivalry, we're in love. Which I think this is also sort of a riff on fan fiction tropes, so I'm not going to go through and read it.
I didn't pick up on that. That's interesting.
No, I mean, it's like enemies to friends to lovers. That's what he's doing. It's just really weird because Hermione doesn't get any personhood outside of she's Harry's rival. And then it's like, of course, we're fighting all the time. We must be in a romance.
Yes.
But it just doesn't work because I think that, it's supposed to be comedic. It falls flat. It just doesn't. It does not work.
Yeah, this is where the idea of the Bayesian conspiracy comes in, his little pact with Draco.
Because Hermione tricks him into going on a date because he loses a reading competition with her.
Look, we've all been there. That's actually the
recording this episode.
Only dates I've ever been on were because I lost a reading competition. I did like the line in chapter 21 about how can we tell who's in the Bayesian conspiracy? Should we have some kind of mark? And Harry says, it's called a PhD, and wouldn't that make it too easy to identify our people? Felt very seen there. Yeah, this conversation goes on forever because it's a thing in this book. I also highlighted later in this chapter, with a resigned feeling that the universe would come get him anyway, and I commented, isn't he too rational for this? Like, this is just one of these things. Isn't Harry a hyper-rationalist who should be interrogating his feelings? The universe is going to come get him? What?
I liked the line, what's true is already so. Owning up to it doesn't make it worse.
You know what? I did like that too. I think that's a very good philosophy.
Oh, here's the refutation of the rape thing. He hadn't redeemed Draco yet, not even close. Contrary to what Draco himself might now believe, Draco is still the child of a Death Eater through and through. Still a boy who'd grown up thinking rape was something the cool older kids did. But it was one heck of a start. And this is where he's teaching Draco, I think, about pureblood shit.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. The pureblood thing comes in. There's a lot of it around here. There's also, I think, in the next chapter, there's a really off-putting aside about another Ravenclaw with the parenthetical. Her parents came from a non-English speaking culture and thus raised her with an actual work ethic, where I was like, what? And then,
you should keep reading that sentence.
Yes, and then right after that, he refers to the student Anthony Goldstein, and which I love. I mean, I legitimately love as a name for a guy at Hogwarts. Yeah. And Anthony Goldstein is the parenthetical about him is he's, quote, out of a certain tiny ethnic group that won 25% of the Nobel Prizes. Yeah. And look, I love celebrating Jewish excellence. Certainly, I'm emblematic of it myself. And it but it was just like, why are we saying this here? What are we doing? It's so out of nowhere and unnecessary. I'm glad he refutes the fucking pureblood stuff because he definitely does.
Yeah, but I don't even feel like reading any of it of him explaining Bayesian shit to Draco, and it's just it's tedious. I think maybe it's one of the more logic, teaching Draco to reason. He awakens as a scientist, and there's no going back.
And has an absolutely unhinged reaction when he has this awakening, which basically his face falls off, and he's like, oh, he freaks the fuck out. I do want to highlight in this chapter 22, he talks about N-rays, which is actually a very interesting story and worth reading about. That's a real thing, and it's cool and a great example about how a bunch of people completely deluded themselves. It's a really, really interesting story. So look up that whole thing.
Oh, yeah. I liked his little explanation of it.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. That's an interesting history of science thing.
And I feel like maybe that pinpoints a lot of what people find compelling about this is that they see something like Newcomb's problem and then Google it and learn about it. But there's a difference between a text that teaches you something and a text that is a hyperlink to go read a Wikipedia page about something.
Yes. I highlighted also in this chapter, towards the end, Dr. Malfoy, said Dr. Potter with a hopeful look, I was wondering if the Journal of Irreproducible Results could consider my publication for a paper entitled blah, blah, blah. So basically he sets up Draco. He's like, I'm going to come at you and I want you to find reasons to not accept. I'm going to try to pretend you're an editor of a journal, and I'm going to try to publish my paper, and you have to reject it. Now, this is an in-joke, actually. The Journal of Irreproducible Results is a real thing. It is a humorous science journal where people publish stupid papers. I'm actually not sure if it's still going, but they have a famous thing called the Ig Nobel Prizes that they do every year, where they highlight research that is kind of silly on its face. Like, I can't remember, it's like when you drop a piece of buttered toast, what side does it land on?
Gotcha.
Stuff like that. It's kind of like silly things. Look up the Ig Nobel Prizes. But that is a real, thing. So it's sort of a call out. It's the kind of thing nerds find funny. And some of it actually is pretty funny. But that's it's an in-joke for scientists.
It's like the Ready Player One thing of haha, wink if you know this sick reference.
That's exactly what it is.
Which is really what any Easter egg is. It's just this thing has such an air of superiority that any of those just feel like...
Yeah.
Here's a little bit. I'm not holding it against him, but I think that this is a weird characterization to make for the only girl in the story that's prominent for the first 300,000 words. Hermione still felt a little shaky as she sat down next to Mandy at the Ravenclaw table. Hermione's lunch had 2 fruits, tomato slices and peeled tangerines, 3 vegetables, carrots, and more carrots, 1 meat, fried Dirichal drumsticks whose unhealthy coating she would carefully remove, and 1 little piece of chocolate cake that she would earn by eating the other parts. Mm-hmm. Which I guess, sure, let's give Hermione an eating disorder, whatever.
Also, why, again, it's not like this book doesn't describe enough things. Did we need this? We did not.
Yeah. Here's a passage that I liked. And I mean that genuinely and not quote unquote liked, as I've said multiple times this episode.
Like, did you like it, or do you just like it?
I like it the way that Hermione likes Harry.
Someone text EY.
All the sensations of that bright world were really happening in that quiet cave of bone you called your skull, the place where you lived and never ever left. If you really wanted to say hello to someone, to the actual person, you wouldn't shake their hand. You'd knock gently on their skull and say, "How are you doing in there?" That was what people were. That's where they really lived. Nice. I think there's so much of this where he has a couple of sentences or a passage that are pretty good. And it's like, if this wasn't 600,000 words, if you had an editor,
yes,
there wouldn't be all this shit. And maybe my opinion of this wouldn't be this is a garbage fire.
Again, I said it before. There's a core idea here for the whole thing that I really like. The do science and magic. Let's skip over this whole experiment they do, even though again, actually, I like this idea. Let's go get evidence. Sure, great. It just takes forever, and whatever. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh my god. Okay, so the battle.
Yes, this is what I want to get to. The fucking battle.
This is the worst part of this.
It is
maybe
awful. So what happens here is now they're in a competition for Quirrell points. And for whatever reason, I don't even remember why, maybe you do, Quirrell says, okay, I'm going to appoint 3 of you as generals, and you're going to control armies. And then there are rules for the battles which involve getting or losing Quirrell points. And whoever has the most Quirrell points gets their wish. And now begins, so they have 3 different armies. And the people in charge are, of course, Draco, Harry, and Hermione. Hermione's army is with the Sunshine, right?
The Sunshine Regiment.
The Sunshine Regiment. Draco's is the Dragon Regiment.
No, the Dragon Army.
Dragon Army. And Harry's is the Chaos Legion. Is that right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I like the name Chaos Legion. I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
But nothing matters. No one cares about getting Quirrell points. We're not given any reason to care about getting Quirrell points that I could find.
Yeah.
And what follows is a series of incoherent machinations which describe the battles that they do. And it goes on for fucking ever.
I'm pretty sure this whole first section with the battles is the length of a full book. It might be 100,000 words or something.
It is so you just never quite understand what's happening
because he's bad at writing
because
action.
he's bad at writing action.
You understand why so much of this quote unquote book is lectures, because he's not, in the same way that does not have clarity in his explanations of ideas. He extremely does not have clarity in terms of writing action. And when you've got three different armies and then getting to the point where traitors are allowed, so everyone's double crossing each other. And all of this is like,
there's some meta lesson here, which comes out at the very end, which is...
Yeah, but it's bad Ender's Game is what it is, including direct references to Ender's Game, like the enemy is down.
Which is an even more unflattering comparison, because all you want is for it to end. And it's a bad ender because it doesn't fucking end. It just keeps going on. And at some point, he even starts putting in the tally for the Quirrell points.
What?
And
it's just them saying somnium, stupefy,
yeah,
protego,
they're putting
somnium.
The battles, no one's getting hurt. They're putting kids to sleep. And except some of them are faking it, and some of them are faking other things, and people start defecting.
And then, like,
and there's a whole series of rules.
Am I going to partner with Sunshine Regiment to take down Harry, but actually I'm collaborating with it? And then Blaze Zabini is a spy, and then one of them is all underwater.
And does anyone else expect it? And what if I expected them to expect it? Would then they not expect? It's
all this build up, and then like the final battle. Again, there's like no consequence to it.
Nope. They battle underwater, which is okay, cool idea, but. People are like, the other thing is about the points, the way they're adding up, I did not have the patience to sit down, because you kind of have to figure out, okay, one thing gets you 2 points, the other thing loses a point, and sometimes you can get 3. But there's all this like math that you're forced to do to figure out what's going on. And I didn't figure it out. I just like accepted the totals and kept moving on because it was so incoherent and not worth thinking about. And then at the end, how does it end, Leighton?
How does it end?
They tie.
It's a perfect tie.
3-way tie, which is evidence for the fact that this is a story, because that only happens in a story, which is like some piece of metafiction that drives me nuts.
And then Quirrell does a big speech, and I don't hate his big speech. I think it's a pretty good.
No, Quirrell's speech is okay. Yep.
Especially because it is coming from the mouth of Voldemort. But then there are 2 wishes. Hermione's wish
so
is
they each get a wish. Is the way this plays out. They each get a wish. All 3 of them. Yes.
And all of this is building up to, what are the wishes going to be? Hermione wishes.
You can wish for anything. The way this is presented. The only reason this is supposed to matter to anybody is what this wish is going to be.
Hermione wishes for Ravenclaw to win the House Cup. Draco wishes for Slytherin to win the House Cup. Harry wishes for the snitch to not be in Quidditch.
Well, Harry wishes for something which burns up, like Quirrell destroys it, and that says, you can't wish that. And in my mind, I was like, did he wish for infinity more wishes? But
take me back to your exceptionally tasty snack closet.
Could I have just a couple more of those snacks? And that bed was so comfortable. So yeah, Harry's talked out of basically denied his first wish, also told not to tell anybody, and which ends up being, or at least what he says is, he wants Quirrell to be the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor next year. That's what he says. But what he eventually, the second wish, the real wish is, let's kill the snitch. Let's change. By the way, hey everybody, I just got to Hogwarts. I'm the boy who lived. Every time the phrase "boy who lived" showed up, made me lose my skull.
Or Dumbledore's full name.
Or Dumbledore's full name. I realize that I'm kind of a newcomer to this culture here. I know you have this sport that's very important to you. Here's the thing, though. You're dumb, and the sport is stupid, and I'm going to change it because I have the power to do so right now. So, boom. Guess
it's
what?
called world optimization, Brian.
Yeah. You guys think the snitch is so great? Yeah. It's gone.
In the battle section, here's an excerpt. And Neville softly began to sing the Song of Chaos.
Oh.
The tune was what a Muggle would have identified as John Williams's Imperial March, also known as Darth Vader's theme. And the words Harry had added were easy to remember, and the words are just doom, and he writes it out in the syncopated beat of...
Yeah. Doom, 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 doom.
Yeah. Why do we have to do that? Why?
Yeah.
Mr. Potter, Professor Quirrell said, his lips set in a thin line. I agreed to act as your adult guardian on this expedition. I did not agree to advise you on your choice of presents. I don't do Christmas, Mr. Potter. How about Newton, miss? Harry said brightly. Isaac Newton actually was born on December 25th, unlike some other historical figures I could name.
Oh, shit. Can he do that?
Gotti. Oh, yeah, here's this thing that annoyed me. Coordination problems, part 1.
I'm in there right now, yeah.
Yeah, the version of decision theory.
Wait, yeah, keep going.
The version of decision theory used in this chapter is not the academically dominant one. It's based on something called timeless decision theory that's under development by, among others, names and, well, coughs a few times, me.
Mm-hmm.
Bruh.
What is this? Is this their chaos leisure? They have their So they have their little things that they have to say at the beginning of each meeting, and it's Monty Python and Lewis Carroll quotes, which is again the most basic nerd shit ever.
This genre of mainstream nerd. I think maybe that's the thing.
My hovercraft. So what he says is, Harry says, "My hovercraft is full of eels." Everybody else says, "I will not buy this record. It is scratched." It's from a specific Monty Python sketch. Then, all mimsy were the borogroves and the mome wraths out grape. Okay. Yeah. Again, real low-hanging nerd fruit.
Yeah. It reminds me of, capital S, capital K, smart kid reciting all of Jabberwocky to a rapturous gifted kids class.
That's exactly what it is. Also name drops Douglas Hofstadter here because you can't go.
Again.
Yep.
Here's a bit that I liked.
Yeah.
This is now, quote unquote, liked. Hermione left the classroom in something of a daze. Zabini's plan hadn't been the obvious one. It had been strange and complicated and layered and the sort of thing she would have expected Harry to come up with, not Zabini. It felt wrong just for her to be able to understand a plan like that. Young girls shouldn't be able to understand plans like that. The hat would have sorted her into Slytherin if it had seemed that she could understand plans like that. Ah, Christ. So there's a prisoner's dilemma bit.
Of course, you can't write a book about rationality without including the prisoner's dilemma, and then adds a whole thing about but what if there's a lot of people and you know what they're like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all
and declaring is the true prisoner's dilemma.
Yeah, exactly. All boilerplate stuff. While at
repeated
the same time
blood
is
for the blood god.
That is what is that a reference to?
I actually don't know. I'm just so fucking tired of seeing it.
Lovecraft? There's a lot of Lovecraft references in this.
Yeah. And I say that I'm sick of seeing blood for the blood god, but literally earlier today while ranting to myself, I said content for the content god, so really I can't.
Let's see. What's it's from Warhammer. Maybe.
No, of course.
Yeah, unless that's a reference to something else. But I am finding references to it in Warhammer. Great. Cool.
Okay, I'm scrolling.
Well, we have to wrap this up because we're getting near 2 hours and we're actually kind of close to the end here. He recommends a book about the Third Reich to someone, which is a cool guy.
I highlighted that too. Yeah. Professor McGonagal leaned forward over her desk. The worry was showing plainer on her face now. Miss Granger, it's not about courage. It's about what's healthy for young girls.
Yep. Good young girls. Got to keep those young girls good.
Yeah. Status differentials.
I thought the thing somewhere, or was it earlier? Somewhere around here, he wants to transfigure just part of an object and is told that's impossible, but because he's smart and knows science, he actually can. He does part of an eraser, which is, I fucking guess, if transfiguration works by thinking about one thing and then thinking about something else, I suppose, and then that becomes actually a pretty major thing because now he can just transfigure parts of stuff, which no wizard has ever done. Dumbledore has some line I was only 14. It took me until I was 14 to discover a brand new thing. Didn't like that. How about, so Quirrell not only has his, to quote you, hot fucking little bedroom in the back of his,
hold on.
Your words, not mine, in the back of his classroom. Quirrell also, so Harry goes home for Christmas break. Quirrell charms his parents to sleep and then breaks into the house. Into Harry's bedroom specifically, and is like, yo boy, come here, let's go for a walk. And Harry's just like, I believe there's some like rationalization of this somewhere.
I
But he's
totally
like,
forgot about that.
The only rational choice is for me to go with him. I thought that was so nuts and funny.
Is it like the Ravenclaw way is that I have to save my curiosity?
That's right. Yes.
Exactly. This is after like Harry's family has dinner with Hermione's family, but the whole thing is set up like they expect them to be married, which, you know, as a smart kid who had smart boy friends, I know the pressure that every adult is like, oh my God, you guys are so cute. Are you dating? Is that your boyfriend? So I guess that chapter is kind of doing that. But again, within the context of everything else and also the way that this story writes about women.
Well, also, there's a weird Rashomon kind of aspect to this one. Actually, reminds me of a weird Rashomon. I have to get a doctor. But there's a weird Rashomon thing.
One day I'll be old enough to comprehend.
Yeah.
As soon as I'm old enough, I'll comprehend Rashomon.
There are two perspectives that the very beginning of the chapter is written from, which is completely unnecessary because they're not interesting perspectives.
Yeah.
They're just like two people listening to the same thing. At some point, Dumbledore calls Harry in because now here's the last thing we should talk about, which is the Dementor section.
Yeah.
So they go back after Christmas break, and now Quirrell has an amazing idea, really great idea. We're gonna bring in the Big D, a Dementor, and we're gonna teach these kids in the field basically how to cast a Patronus. Okay.
Come on into my my weird little bedroom.
Yeah, actually the Dementor has kind of been hanging out on my bed, chomping on some extra tasty souls.
Exceptionally tasty.
Yeah, and so I brought this Dementor. I got it. I went down to the store, bought a Dementor. We're gonna bring him in, and Dumbledore and others are gonna hang out and protect you, but you're gonna try to cast your Patronus spell. Okay. So, for some fucking reason, Dumbledore calls Harry into his office to be like, how could this go wrong? Because you're a genius at thinking of this kind of stuff. How could you use it for evil? They talk about it. Dumbledore agrees to bring the Dementor in.
Harry, you were so very wise.
Yes. There's a lot of that, like, I'm going to talk to this 11-year-old about what could go wrong here, not me who fought the Dark Lord in, the singular most important battle against dark magic of their age. Okay, so now everybody gets to try to cast a Patronus, and you go up to the Dementor.
Hold on. I think there is an important preamble here, which I'm not going to read, but when Harry is in Dumbledore's office, he starts arguing with him about... I'll read a little bit of it. Death is bad, said Harry.
This thing, yes.
Discarding wisdom for the sake of clear communication. Holy shit! Discarding wisdom for the sake of clear communication?
Yeah.
Could we have been doing this all along?
Maybe.
Very bad. Extremely bad. Being scared of death is like being scared of a great big monster with poisonous fangs. It actually makes a great deal of sense and does not, in fact, indicate that you have a psychological problem. Okay, said Harry, let me put it this way. Do you want to die? Because if so, there's this muggle thing called the suicide prevention hotline. Which I don't know, it's kind of a good bit.
Yeah, good burn.
When it is time, the old wizard said quietly, not before. I would never seek to hasten the day, nor seek to refuse it when it comes. Harry was frowning sternly. That doesn't sound like you have a very strong will to live, headmaster. Harry, ... The old wizard's voice was starting to sound a little helpless, and he had paced to a spot where his silver beard, unnoticed, had drifted into a crystalline glass goldfish bowl and was slowly taking on a greenish tint that crept up the hairs. I think I may not have made myself clear. Dark wizards are not eager to live. They fear death. They do not reach up towards the sun's light, but flee the coming of night into the infinitely darker caverns of their own making without moon or stars. Again, this is all right. It is not life they desire, but immortality, and they're so driven to grasp at it that they will sacrifice their very souls.
Yeah, I like this.
Do you want to live forever, Harry? Yes, and so do you, said Harry. I want to live one more day. Tomorrow I will still want to live one more day. Therefore I want to live forever. Proof by induction on the positive integers.
That's a real thing, and he does not use it incorrectly.
If you don't want to die, it means you want to live forever. If you don't want to live forever, it means you want to die. You've got to do one thing or the other. I'm not getting through here, am I? And so like he's asked what he wants to, like, what are you going to do living forever? And it's the, curing cancer, going to the moon thing that you said earlier.
Right.
But blah, blah, blah. He's trying to disprove how the like veil that's introduced that Sirius dies in later.
Again, interesting idea. Is there really an afterlife in this world? Sure. You know what? You talk about ghosts. I thought it was kind of, I forget how much this is talked about in the original book. Those are not the ghosts of people who died. They're like basically recordings that have some degree of, shall we say, AI to them who can like answer questions, but they're not really the ghosts of the people. And then he briefly talks about how insane that is to have someone, one of those teaching a class because the guy's a bad teacher and sucks at it. And I like that section. So there's an interesting question here. Is there an afterlife? Because if there is, which the presence of ghosts strongly implies, why is everybody so scared of dying and what's going on with Voldemort, et cetera, et cetera? Interesting question. But then they completely tank this discussion. Is this what you're looking for right now?
I don't know. I'm just reading through all of it because I think I highlighted most of it. And the thing is that it weaves in and out of being a good argument. That it's sort of this idea of like, well, is a soul real? And kind of as it's important preamble for this whole Dementor bit where it's, the Dementors are death and they want your soul, which is certainly a thing. It's your life force, is like your life is your soul. What were you getting into a point of a thing you were going to read?
I was just going to say the thing at the end. So they have this kind of nice humanistic discussion of wanting to live forever. But the reason Harry wants to live forever is essentially so he can go to space.
Yes. And to skate over a lot of this, Harry initially can't cast a Patronus and it affects him more deeply than everyone else. And he's like not thinking of a happy enough memory. And now I do need to find this specific bit.
Yeah. Okay. So while you're doing that, anyway, this discussion about death at Dumbledore, eventually he's going to go out and he wants to find a way out of death for everybody so everybody can go. It's not just him. That would make him a bad person. He's one thing that Yudkowsky definitely goes into is Harry is the most moral person you've ever met. He's extremely concerned with being good, not evil, which maybe makes him so good that it's evil, ? But he wants to cure death for everybody. And now we get into this like singularity kind of bullshit. And that's so we can all go out into space and meet on the other side of the galaxy and have a big party at Mirror Chuck E. Cheese. So we go to the Dementors. People are casting. A couple kids do a Patronus that's fucking cool. Hermione doesn't really succeed. Yep. So people like, and now actually this is interesting in the context of her diet. People start shoving chocolate down her face, which she's probably not excited about.
Which Yudkowsky has tweeted about, handcuffing a woman to a bed and feeding her chocolate when she says she's not getting enough caloric intake.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God. Actually, I need to look up an image of that. But so then Harry tries to cast a Patronus, as you said, doesn't work. Memory's not happy enough. So
can I read this bit because
yes,
I think most of it is pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. Harry's gaze went to what lay beneath the cloak, the horror far worse than any decaying mummy. Rowena Ravenclaw might also have known, for it was an obvious enough riddle once you saw it as a riddle. And it was also obvious why the Patronuses were animals. The animals didn't know, and so were sheltered from the fear. But Harry knew and would always know and would never be able to forget. He tried to teach himself to face reality without flinching, and though Harry had not yet mastered that art, all those grooves had been worn into his mind, the learned reflex to look toward the painful thought instead of away. Harry would never be able to forget by thinking warm, happy thoughts about something else, and that was why the spell hadn't worked for him. So Harry would think a warm, happy thought that wasn't about something else. Harry drew forth his wand, and Professor Flitwick had returned to him, put his feet into the beginning stance for the Patronus charm. Within his mind, Harry discarded the last remnants of the Peace of the Phoenix, put aside the calm, the dreamlike state, remembered instead of Fawkes's piercing cry, and roused himself for battle. Called upon all the pieces and elements of himself to awaken, raised up within himself all the strength that the Patronus charm could ever draw upon to put himself into the right frame of mind for the final warm and happy thought, remembered all bright things. The books his father had bought him, Mom's smile when Harry had handmade her a Mother's Day card, an elaborate thing that had used half a pound of spare electronics parts from the garage to flash lights and beep a little tune, and had taken him 3 days to make. Professor McGonagal telling him that his parents had died well, protecting him, as they had. Realizing that Hermione was keeping up with him and even running ahead, that they could be true rivals and friends. Coaxing Draco out of the darkness, watching him slowly move towards the light. Neville and Seamus and Lavender and Dean and everyone else who looked up to him, everyone that he would have fought to protect if anything threatened Hogwarts, everything that made life worth living. His wand rose into the starting position for the Patronus charm. Harry thought of the stars, the image that had almost held off the Dementor even without a Patronus. Only this time, Harry added the missing ingredient. He'd never truly seen it, but he'd seen the pictures in the video. The Earth, blazing blue and white with reflected sunlight as it hung in space amid the black void and the brilliant points of light. It belonged there within that image because it was what gave everything else its meaning. The Earth was what made the stars significant, made them more than uncontrolled fusion reactions, because it was Earth that would someday colonize the galaxy and fulfill the promise of the night sky. Would they still be plagued by Dementors, the children's children's children, the distant descendants of humankind as they strode from star to star? No, of course not. The Dementors were only little nuisances, paling into nothingness in the light of that promise. Not unkillable, not invincible, not even close. You had to put up with little nuisances if you were one of the lucky and unlucky few to be born on Earth, on ancient Earth, as it would be remembered someday. That, too, was part of what it meant to be alive. If you were one of the tiny handful of sentient beings born into the beginning of all things before intelligent life had come fully into its power, that the much vaster future depended on what you did here now in the earliest days of dawn, when there was still so much darkness to be fought and the temporary nuisances like Dementors. It continues. Oh my God. This goes on for so long. Like, I think there was genuinely a good idea in there, and then he comes to this long-termism, we're going to space shit.
As Harry explains later, what was the thought that enabled him to do cast the Patronus, and it works. Works actually better than a Patronus ever has, because it's the shape of a
human being.
It's a human being. He Patronused a human. And look, we've all Patronused a few humans in our time. But
a figure with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, standing upright, the animal Homo sapiens, the shape of a human being.
And when later asked how could he do it, Harry says the reason he was able to do it was because essentially of his unwavering knowledge that he would be able to someday transcend death.
Yes. And it's like this long thing. I won't cower in fear of death, not while I have a chance of winning. I won't let death touch me. I won't let death touch the ones I love. And even if you do end me before I end you, another will take my place, and another into the wound in the world is healed at last. And the Dementor fucking dies. He killed the Dementor.
The first person to kill a Dementor. I do briefly talk about throwing a Dementor into the sun, which I thought was pretty great. I like that. Like, what if we threw that fucker in the sun? Hell yeah, like that. Throw that in the sun. Yeah, so he kills this Dementor with this Patronus. Patronus 2.0, as he says.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. He Patronus literally calls it, check out the Patronus 2.0.
Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, what? Bro killed a Dementor? Yeah, he killed a Dementor. And this is definitely one of those things where the more you know about Yudkowsky, and I know blessedly little, the more you see this is part of the singularity type. We're all going to live forever kind of long-termist, as you say, bullshit. Yeah. And it makes it a billion times worse. There was a version of this where all these happy memories come together for Harry, and that's what enables him to cast the Patronus. And okay, it's a human, it's dumb, but whatever.
Well, because if the turn was that, like, he's been so cold and logical and he's been neglecting human relationships this whole time, and the thing that made him realize that, like, what's important is your connections with other people, like, okay, and then it becomes a person. Sure. But the fact that it's the ultimate happy thing, and I reject the natural order of death.
Yeah.
So we can colonize space.
Which is what kills the death thing. Oh, my God. It
kills it, because instead of being like depression, as it is in the books, or, you know, like sadness, it's death, so that Yudkowsky can fictionally conquer death. But I think it kind of comes back around to this whole juvenile sense in this entire piece of work. that you reject authority, you reject academia. The only thing that matters is your mind once you learn how to think correctly, and you're smarter than everybody else around you, and the dumbs are not even worth acknowledging. And I think it's additionally juvenile to look at all of human history and be like, death, not for me.
Yeah.
Like, that's...
It's markedly insane.
What do you think religion is? What do you think that has been the psychological function of religion until forever? Yeah. Like, art is about living forever or whatever. You don't, it's like, and it, there's a bit in the Azkaban section where he's not able to cast his human Patronus to kill all the Dementors in Azkaban because that means he'll be caught, and everybody, you know, Dumbledore and everybody knows that he knows how to kill them now. So he has to get through it without using a Patronus. And so within his mind, he identifies that the Voldemort, you know, and he doesn't quite know that it's Voldemort yet, but that there's something within his mind that is crying, that is so afraid of death, and that's what's fully preventing him. And there's like this inner child work where he's like mentally holding this thing and telling him it's going to be okay, which is kind of a fascinating way to look at that. If we're going to do inner child psychological work, to, you know, you need to comfort this part of yourself. But then of course the conclusion is, now I no longer believe in death. Yeah,
it's this kind of like weird agenda-driven bullshit.
Yes,
that it's like, just write a good story. I understand that this is a vehicle for your, you know, particular viewpoint here, but it's so naked that and at the expense. I mean, I don't care if it's a good piece of art. Like, I don't, whatever your agenda is, doesn't matter. Do it in an artful way, and then we can talk. But it's just, it's like, this is an especially frustrating section because you almost had it. It's happened a few times. You almost had it. There's this discussion of death with Dumbledore, which is nice. There's this thing here. And then at the last second, we do this weird left turn into, you know, and we're going to live forever. It's like, no, oh, dude, no. Like, you actually... it was
an audible, like, groan and facepalm. Because I felt, as I was reading that bit, I was like, am I getting some goodwill towards this? Like, he's kind of reeling me back in. And the thing is that the ultimate conclusion of this story being that Voldemort tried to kill Harry as a baby because he knew that the prophecy was, once he merged magic and science, he would become so powerful he would destroy the universe. Almost like a super intelligent AI. Mm-hmm. Like, I kept the thing. It's the anti-deathism, which, like, accept your death. Life has meaning because we will die. This is what we get. I don't think it's wise to put all of your stakes in we're going to make it so we can live forever by going to space and also preventing the creation of an unfriendly AI. The fact that all of it comes around to his views here, instead of satisfying narrative conclusions, that it, like, that's why it feels like a manifesto, because we almost hit something good and then we do all this shit and it's like, this is just you lecturing me again. The characters are lecturing each other and you're lecturing me about how going to colonizing space is the most important thing that we could possibly do.
This is why 41 is the most important number. It's like, oh, what are we doing?
Anyway. And I couldn't help but think about, like, I said this in the previous episode, but so much of it reminds me of Scientology. Like, this is the sci-fi text, that this is like the battlefield Earth. But it's like, oh, wait a second, you guys believe that?
We have to wrap this up because I have to edit this shit. Don't read this book. It's I really hated it. I hated this book more than anything we've read for a bad book club series. It was actively unfun, pretty much start to finish. I am very, very curious about the people who love it, and those people seem to actually exist. But I cannot recommend basically anything about this.
Which especially sucks, and maybe I hate it so especially because the moments where it's cooking, it's kind of cooking harder than a lot of the other stuff that we've read, which is why it's so disappointing, because comes to weird conclusions, is so turgid, so long. Like, if this was 50,000 words, I would love this shit.
I think you really hit it on the head where with saying, if he had an editor, this could be actually pretty great. There's a core idea here. There's some really good passages, but you just have to sift through so much dreck to get there. it is not worth your time. This is.
I don't value my own time, so I'll probably finish it. And I will say, if you get past the point we just talked about, the Azkaban arc, compared to everything else, is pretty good. If you want pure Quirrell and Harry, which is kind of the best part of the book, sort of best comparatively, then I don't know, maybe check it out. That's like chapters, but then it goes straight to the fucking battle magic again.
Yes, which is a bananas choice. I would like to see people, if anyone wants to do any art of this, I'd like to see a picture of Quirrell's bedroom. And really, you got to I want to see a nice bed. It's got to be very relaxing, because you wouldn't send a kid who just got beat up there to relax unless it was very relaxing. Lots of snacks. How do those snacks, what's the quality of those snacks?
Exceptionally tasty.
Exceptionally tasty snacks. And not,
maybe
look,
we don't ask
this,
people to make fan art of Quirrell's grooming parlor.
I'm just saying, if they were going to, no Muggle brands, please. Right. Those are not exceptionally tasty. Those are ultra processed foods, which, as we all know, are bad for your brain and make you thus irrational.
So, Brian, what we believe is that this sucks. Why do we believe what we believe?
Because it sucks.
See you next week, everybody.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Late Night is produced by Brian Wecht and Leighton Gray. Sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/LeightonNight. Follow us on Twitter at LeightonNight, on Instagram at Leighton_night, or email us at leightonnight@gmail.com.